When there's an injustice against you or someone you love or someone you believe in, stand up. Don't sit down on them. They need you.
Welcome to Pop Culture Justice here on Popcorned Planet. I am Andy Signore, and I'm so happy to be with you guys today on a Wednesday. And I look forward to having so much fun with you today, as well as having a really interesting conversation. Yesterday, we talked about the Danny Masterson trial with the legendary Christopher Melcher, attorney at law, who gave us a lot of interesting insight, because I know a lot of people have been questioning, what's this trial about? What's happened? What are the charges? Why is Scientology involved? My God, the emails I got after yesterday's show of you guys informing me of Scientology, etc. It was a lot. So thank you guys. I tried to be fair. I always try to be fair. But yes, I do have my own biases and opinions based on what I learned about Scientology. Well, we have a special guest today. I'm excited to introduce Chris Shelton is here today, along with it's Kim. Hey, Kim, good to see you. But I think Kim and I are both excited because we have Chris here, who is basically an ex-Scientologist who has a YouTube channel, has been very outspoken, which is not always a safe or popular thing to do in calling out Scientology and cults, coercive and control, recovery. You can find him on YouTube, Chris Shelton MSc. First of all, welcome to the show, Chris. How are you doing today?
Hi, thanks very much for inviting me. I'm doing good.
Well, I appreciate you being here. I guess for folks that are unfamiliar with your background, can we start with like a little, where'd you come from? What happened? How long were you in Scientology for? And let's start there.
Absolutely. So I'm what's called a second generation Scientologist. I was raised in Scientology. My parents were regular public Scientologists. They weren't billion-year contract Sea Org members. So I went to public school, had a fairly regular looking life growing up until high school, when I actually officially got involved with the church myself and started doing its services. They have classwork and counseling work that they offer, and you pay for this, and I paid for it and did services as a kid, and then I got recruited to join staff and work for the Church of Scientology, which I proceeded to do for the next 25 years. I worked for the Church of Scientology in Santa Barbara for 8 years, and then in 1995, I joined the Sea Organization, which is the billion-year contract, the uniforms, they look like Navy people, the 24/7, yes sir, no sir, how high sir kind of operation. And I did that for another 17 years when I finally left in 2013 and got out of Scientology and got out of that headspace. And ever since then, it's been a process of recovery from it and educating others about it. And so I wrote a book about the topic. I didn't write a book about me. I wrote a book about Scientology. And I have put forth a lots of videos on the topic, breaking it all down. I've interviewed psychologists, sociologists, religious studies people, even neuroscientists about the psychology of coercive control, which is what Scientology engages in. And that's why we call it a destructive cult, rather than looking at it as a legit religion in the same way you might look at, Christianity or Islam.
Well, I want to start with a tough question. Let's start there. Because let's really get to it. And again, this is going to be Chris's opinions. We're hearing his side, and that's what we're doing today. And I'm going to be hearing him out. Why do you think Scientology is more of a cult than, say, any religion? Like, what really is the difference in your mind that creates this coercive control that separates it from what some might argue any religion is pretty much doing that?
Sure. There's a couple key things you can look at in terms of whether a group is destructive or bad for you versus just a group that has maybe beliefs that not everybody's going to agree with. And it's not about the belief. And I want to make that super, super clear from the top. It has nothing to do with Xenu or body thetans or living forever or any of that as to why Scientology is destructive. Coercive control, put simply, is isolation, manipulation, and control. And this is what domestic abusers do. This is what cult leaders do. This is, you see stories about Charles Manson or Jim Jones or L. Ron Hubbard, and they all kind of are cut from the same cloth. They are manipulators and predators, and they use religious ideas or religious cloaking as an excuse or justification to enrich themselves, to gain power, influence, money, sex, and stability for themselves at the cost of the freedom and civil and human rights of their followers. And there's very clear-cut behavior that Scientology engages in, which is anti-human rights and anti-civil rights. And so those are the abusive practices of Scientology that I rail against and try to expose. The beliefs are secondary to that. And you don't see people leave. And another one of the points that's really important about cults versus religion is what happens when you try to leave. And when you can step out of Catholicism, Christianity, it's not a problem. You know, nobody's going to stalk you and harass you and follow you. And if you have bad things to say about your experience, nobody's going to hire a private investigator to go through your trash and intimidate you and tell your neighbors that, you know, you're being investigated for drug trafficking. And yet this is what happens to former Scientologists who speak out about Scientology. So there are definitely lines in the sand you can draw that show destructive, abusive behavior versus just believing things. And that's what I see as the main difference between a destructive cult like Scientology and a religion.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's good just for people to be aware of if they're watching and they feel like, wait a second, I thought I was in a religion, but I'm feeling pressured or doing things I don't want. These are good things to pay attention to, guys, to know. Can you leave? Will you be allowed to leave? Are you being threatened not to leave or shamed for leaving, etc.? Are things that are problematic. Now, I want to get into your experience there, but I guess it's probably wise we start from the beginning. Like, some might say, well, shit, dude, how'd you screw this up and stumble upon this? No offense, right? You've been out now a while, but it's like, what was it that sort of tricked you, I guess? Are there some good Scientologists? Are there people in there that are, you know, doing well, and there's a eviler side inside? Like, can you give us sort of a breakdown on sort of how you fell into this trap?
Sure. Well, I was raised in it. So I was never asked whether I wanted to be a Scientologist or not. It wasn't a question any more than when you're raised in a Christian household in the South, you know, that's how it is. Right. And so that's how it was for my life. And I grew up with the terminology of Scientology, the concepts and beliefs were very heavily enforced on me. And this involves a lot of personal evaluation of who you are, where you've been, what you've done, even into past lives. And so Scientology children are pretty classically conditioned to believe that they might have been a Scientologist past life, and, you know, that they might have been somebody famous, and, you know, this whole past life thing and the space stuff. So there are some beliefs in Scientology that will create a wedge between a child and the rest of society that I encountered as a kid growing up. It made life a little interesting and difficult for me from time to time. But it was really the usual sorts of things that get people into a destructive cult work on me just as much as anybody else. I went in there when I was 15 years old, and I did their personality test, and I fell for it. You know, they said, hey, look, we've got classes and work and stuff you can do that will improve your conditions. And
just to be clear, that's those e-meter things, right? Like, because I remember walking by the Santa Barbara one on the street there, and they offer it to you as you're walking, like, hey, would you like a personality test? And is that what that is?
Actually, the personality test is a 200 question exam. The e-meter thing is called a stress test. And that's what they put you on the e-meter. And yeah, see if they can make the needle move, and if they can make it move. These are like, that was a thought you had. Yeah. Look at that, you know.
These are methods to sort of get you in to figure out, how do we get you in, or how do we trick you?
Exactly. In fact, the entire point of either the meter in that case or the personality test or any of the other things that they're doing, what they're trying to do is get a certain level of trust established so that you will open up and start telling them all about yourself. And from there, they then offer you assistance, support, help through their services. And because they are initially appearing to be incredibly kind, incredibly caring, this is called love bombing. They really kind of go over the top with it to convince you that they have your best interests at heart. And if you fall for that and they get you hooked in through some problem, stress, trauma, issue you're having. That's the kind of person who generally will fall for these kind of situations. As it's anybody's susceptible. It depends on what's happening in your life.
Right.
If there's trauma, if there's a recent change of some significant kind, a loss of a loved one, moving to a new city, you're unsure what's going on, lost all your connections, and here's a friendly helping hand. Oh, well, this looks good. Nobody joins a cult thinking that's what they're doing, and Scientology is no exception to that rule. So when I joined, I had the support of my parents. I thought this was a good thing to do. Most of my parents and friends were Scientologists, the friends of my parents, and it was my life. So I didn't go in there with defenses up and screens up. I went in there like, oh, these are a good bunch of people and they're here to help me. And so a lot of their work was already done for them.
Right.
It was pretty easy to sign me up.
It reminds me, I did see the Nexium cult documentary, and I bring it up just because I wasn't trying to be mean. Like, it's the most telling thing is you see these really smart, great people who just get wrapped up in it because they're struggling at work or in their identity, and then suddenly you have this seemingly really smart person like applauding you and challenging you and like offering you the world, and it's very easy sometimes for people to sort of get trapped up. So I wasn't trying to be mean. I was just joking about. Go ahead, Kim. You had a question.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask. Forgive me if I'm using the wrong terms, and please correct me.
Yeah.
When you were younger, obviously growing up in Scientology, you would have been exposed to a lot of things within the culture. When was auditing, like with the e-meter, introduced into your life?
Okay, that usually comes in after a person is at least 8 or 9 years old.
Okay.
And there are non-metered, there's actions and methods they can use and techniques they can use without using an e-meter. But the metered stuff tends to come in around that time. And by the time I was a teenager, I was holding the cans in a room with an auditor receiving Scientology auditing. And in fact, I even learned how to do it as a teenager. I learned how to use the e-meter and audited other people.
Now, I want you to clarify what auditing is, since Kim's asking. It's a good question, but from what I've heard, like the rumors of auditing, it's like a lie detector is what some people say. Like there's this sort of, rumor about Scientology. That's how they trick their people. They sort of put you through these really intense therapy sessions and they audit you and they're recording and they're basically trying to figure out your deepest dark secrets to use against you. Would you say that's accurate? Is that over dramatic? What is that auditing?
No, that's not over dramatic. That is a good characterization of what Scientology security checking or confessionals are all about. And confessionals or security checking is you could say a subset of auditing. There's a lot of different kinds of auditing that go on. The basic idea with auditing is that you have an auditor, a person in the room who is in charge of what's going on, is fully responsible for everything. And then you have the person receiving the auditing, and that's called a pre-clear in Scientology. There's a ton of language in Scientology, so I'm trying to keep it simple. But the auditor and the pre-clear are two basic terms. And no matter what kind of auditing is going on, the idea is you are somehow facing or dealing with or confronting past stress, trauma, bad things that happen to you. And through the various techniques of auditing, you're trying to take it apart, strip it down, recall it, relive it. There's various methods, all of which are designed to de-stress you or de-traumatize you and increase or improve your spiritual abilities. And I have to stress in describing this, and I don't remember to do this often enough, so let me do it now. This is a money-making scam. I got to be really clear about that, because I'm going to describe this in such a way that it sounds useful, and it's not. This is very destructive to a person's mental health. But that's how it's presented, is auditor, pre-clear, we're going to de-stress, de-traumatize you, and remove what's called charge, another Scientology word, all the charge from your mind, and kind of clear you of it. And that's where that word clear comes from in Scientology, is it's somebody who's been kind of de-stressed of all of their past trauma.
Okay.
Going Clear was a documentary that was exposed a lot of this. Go ahead, Kim. You had a question?
Yeah, I actually was going to ask. So we know that you spent a large portion of your life within Scientology and then even kind of going to the next level of being in the Sea Org. It's been my understanding that there's basically like a ladder. Like I've heard it called the ladder to clear. I don't know if that's correct or
The
not.
bridge.
The
Yeah,
bridge?
bridge.
Okay. I apologize.
Yeah, no
bridge.
problem.
It's okay.
You do not have to apologize to me. There's
No,
These are silly terms.
There's a lot, and I try to keep them straight because I want to be able to represent it properly and that type of thing. How, if you don't mind me asking, how was your journey on the bridge? Because some of the criticism I've read to you is saying that, you weren't that high up or you hadn't done that much. But my understanding is you don't really get into the Sea Org unless, you've done some stuff. So I'm just curious from your perspective, where were you on that journey when you left Scientology?
Sure. Well, let's first off let's clarify that going up the bridge or across the bridge is one metric in Scientology for how much progress you've made.
Okay.
Let's also be clear that another metric is spending 27 years of your life doing it, which I did, right? Yeah. And I got up to the level of clear, which is about, if you look at the chart as a chart, it's about halfway up.
Okay.
I was also highly trained in Scientology because part of Scientology is not just going in for these sessions, but they also want to have you study all of L. Ron Hubbard's lectures and books. And the man was prolific. And there's a lot of classwork that you do in Scientology as well to learn Hubbard's theories about the mind and life and what it's all about. And here's the best way I might sum up the attitude about Scientology about itself. L. Ron Hubbard wrote that Scientology is the one thing that is senior to life itself because it explains all of life. And therefore, it's more important, senior to anything else at all. And he made that statement very unironically. I mean, he really meant that. And so Scientologists think that way. And this is another one of these characteristics of destructive cults that needs to be highlighted when we're talking about Scientology, is it really is not just another belief set. It's an extreme belief set. People in Scientology believe that they have found truth with a capital T and nothing else compares. Nothing else comes close. It's not a matter of, I got my answers, you've got yours. It's, I'm a Scientologist. This is the only answer. Everything else is wrong. And it's my mission and duty in life to get this to you. So that's kind of how Scientologists approach this stuff.
I mean, let's be fair. There's a lot of religions. I could argue there's people who do that.
There's extremity.
Extremism.
Across all belief spectrums. Absolutely. Yeah. But what you'll find in Scientology is a vast majority of its membership is extreme.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Well, right? Because the materials in Hubbard's lectures and the way they talk about it and then the constant reinforcement of the belief set drives a person to an extreme point of view. And that's why you'll see extreme behavior from Scientologists, like the shunning and the disconnection and the stalking and all of that kind of thing.
And just so we're clear, and I'll get to Kim, but L. Ron Hubbard is the creator of Scientology. He was a sci-fi author, is what he was. And then he decided to make this modern science of mental health, the Dianetics, and created this religion, which was made by a sci-fi author, which I laughed just because it is seemingly silly. But that's where all this was coming from. Go ahead, Kim. You had a question.
Yeah, I was just, this was actually going to be a question I was going to ask later, but I feel like we got to a perfect segue point. So I find a lot of other, I'm going to say belief systems. They all tend to have, I wrote it down so I didn't forget it. Yeah. So it's a lot of other belief systems have, for lack of a better term, denominations or different ways of viewing things or teaching scriptures, etc. Are there differences in Scientology churches in that sense, or is everybody believing the same thing and there is only the one way to interpret things?
Yeah, in Scientology, there's a term called standard technology. The technology of Scientology is all of the collected works, the methods, the techniques, all of it. And L. Ron Hubbard was crystal clear over and over and over again that there is only one right way to do something. And the standard tech is the standard method of applying Scientology 100% of the time. And if you do it standardly, it will work 100% of the time, is the claim. Once you learn anything about psychology, you realize how ridiculous this is. But this is the claim in Scientology, is that everybody's the same and they can all be dealt with the same. And so there is not any tolerance for any other opinions or ideas or methods or techniques. It is Hubbard's way or the highway, period.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess I want to get into sort of just like, there's so much to delve into. I mean,
sure.
What is, I guess, what's the most shocking thing you want people to sort of know? Like, what's the scariest thing about your experience in Scientology that like shook you the most when you discovered what was really happening?
Well, the finding out after decades of involvement and commitment to the cause that it was a money-making scam was a pretty big deal for me.
Yeah.
That was a very rude awakening the day that kind of really came and hit me full force. And that happened just a month or two after I had gotten out of the Sea organization. So I had dedicated the better part of my life to this activity. And for that, I was physically, mentally, psychologically abused.
Because you challenged it and like asked the questions, like where did you go to your family first when you sort of started connecting those dots?
Well, I did. And in fact, my family had actually gotten out before I did.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because I went all in. I joined the Sea Org and I was doing 24/7 Scientology.
Is that's this picture we're looking at? The people on this is Sea Org, really?
The what? I'm sorry?
This picture on screen, I don't know if you can see all the people in the captain's suits with on a boat. Is that really?
Oh yeah, that's the Sea Org. Yeah, if they're in Navy uniforms, that's the Sea Org.
What, are you going to war? Like what is? I guess I need to be clear.
Going to war? Yeah, you're going to war against the reactive mind. Yeah. And there's David Miscavige in the center of that picture. That is the head of Scientology now, is David Miscavige there, and he's surrounded by. Actually, a lot of the people in that picture are no longer in the Sea Org or Scientology. They escaped, but that picture was taken many years ago, and yeah.
And were you really just like living on a boat? Like what? Explain this to me. Like what was Sea Org and what were you doing?
Oh, sure. No, I lived in the big blue buildings in Los Angeles. You see those blue buildings with the Scientology sign?
Yeah.
That area is called a Sea Org base. It's a Sea Org. It's the Pacific base or PAC. There's a base in Clearwater, Florida. There's a base in the United Kingdom at St. Hill. There's one in Copenhagen, Denmark. There's one in Sydney, Australia.
They pick really nice cities to live in.
Yeah, these are the cities that Sea Org members live in, and they live and work there, and they stay on the base pretty much all the time. Unless you need to maybe go get some, new socks or underwear or something. You're pretty much on the base all the time. During COVID,
so this is just
nobody
like a fake
was allowed to leave. Ever.
Is this like a fake photo op to create like the cruise, or was there actually any sea work?
No, it started on the sea. That's why it's called the Sea Organization. Back in 1967, L. Ron Hubbard started it as a special project, and he called high-level Scientologists to, be part of his cause, and a handful of them came. None of them knew anything about sailing. L. Ron Hubbard was the only sailor amongst them. And they had to kind of figure it out through the School of Hard Knocks. It's frankly amazing nobody died because they came close many times.
Yeah. It's like I'm on a boat. Yeah. So, all right. So you're on a boat there, whatever, the Sea Org thing. So then these are the high level Scientologists that are sort of, are you cleared at that point? Like are you still always trying to get cleared?
There's not a bridge requirement to be a Sea Org member. You don't have to have attained a certain level on the bridge in order to be a Sea Org member. You have to be a dedicated hardcore Scientologist. The way I try to describe this, and I know that this language might be incendiary to some people, but it's just true. I lived it. I'm telling you, this is how it is. The Sea Org are the fanatics of Scientology. They are the people who have dedicated their entire life to it, and not just their entire life. They dedicate the next billion years of their lifetimes to it. You got to be in a pretty heavy headspace to be doing something like that. And I know exactly what it feels like. It was an extreme place where you really do imagine that there isn't anything else on this planet or really in the whole universe worth anything. Scientology is the only thing that really is worth anything because it's what's salvaging the rest of the planet. And you really are convinced as a Sea Org member that your every action and move and duty is saving Earth, saving this planet and all the people on it. That was why I worked so hard and dedicated myself to it. I didn't want to be abused. I didn't go there to get beat up. I went there to save the planet. And I thought that was the work I was doing, but I was wrong.
Yeah, so I guess is this accurate? Have you seen the South Park version of things?
Yes.
Where they explain Scientology. I'm just trying to find the montage. So just so for people get a rundown.
5 million years ago. Back then, there was a galactic federation of planets, which was ruled over by the evil Lord Xenu. Xenu thought his galaxy was overpopulated, and so he rounded up countless aliens from all different planets, and then had those aliens frozen.
Sorry.
The frozen alien bodies were loaded onto Xenu's galactic cruisers, which looked like DC-8s, except with rocket engines. The cruisers then took the frozen alien bodies to our planet, Earth, and dumped them into the volcanoes of Hawaii. The aliens were no longer frozen. They were dead. The souls of those aliens, however, lived on, and all floated up towards the sky. But the evil Lord Xenu had prepared for this. Xenu didn't want their souls to return, and so he built giant soul catchers in the sky. The souls were taken to a huge soul brainwashing facility, which Xenu had also built on Earth. There, the souls were forced to watch days of brainwashing material, which tricked them into believing a false reality. Xenu then released the alien souls, which roamed the Earth aimlessly in a fog of confusion. At the dawn of man, the souls finally found bodies which they could grab onto. They attached themselves to all mankind, which still to this day causes all our fears, our confusions, and our problems.
Yeah, I think Kyle's face sums it up. I mean, is that accurate?
Yes, it is. It's 100% accurate. It's not even the full story, but it is accurate.
Does that can you laugh at that now when you see it, or is it still like trigger you, or it's like, God, this is really scary stuff that they're getting people to believe?
No, I've been working on my recovery out of Scientology for the last 10 years. I'm pretty
You're
good
at that place. You can laugh. So that was a pretty spot on satire and commentary on what's going on. And I guess that's why some people are sort of have sort of just laughed off this religion. But what's really scary is these Sea Org people, these people who are so connected. This is what it's for. It's to save Earth from Xenu and the souls that are inside of us and the multiple lives that they've been fighting for. We're at that level of trying to, get someone to rationalize, which they just at that point clearly can. Is that why you think it's still so successful? Because they're so deep rooted in this belief system that clearly no one's going to be able to talk them out of?
Well, that is part of the extreme headspace of Scientology is, you're in a belief set that nobody's going to talk you out of. And it is really only through, abuse that people tend to wake up from this when they're, mandated to disconnect from their family or their friends or their grandmother or something. You're like, wait a minute, what? But often people get into such an extreme headspace that they go along with even that. And they shun family and people they've known for over 10, 20 years, just kick them out of their life because suddenly they're saying something critical about Scientology. You can't even express doubts or reservations or concerns about it. The church is perfect. Everything L. Ron Hubbard said is literally true. And if you don't buy it, if you don't go into that and go with that flow, you will very quickly find yourself holding a couple of those cans in a room and being asked very sharp and pointed questions about your personal life and your sexual proclivities and any other things they think might be moral transgressions that you're sitting on that are causing you to have these doubts, fears, and concerns. Because it's never that Scientology is wrong. It's only you who are wrong, see? There's a couple principles in Scientology that come from these beliefs that are important. And when I said earlier about behavior versus belief, one of the beliefs that comes out of this is that because you've lived so many lives in the past, you are a spiritual entity. You are not your body. And that means that children who are Scientologists are treated as though they are immortal spiritual beings who have lived countless lives. They are adults in little bodies, and they are treated like adults in little bodies. They are given responsibilities. I have seen children as young as 12 years old being the auditor in an auditing confessional where they have a pre-clear, a person who's holding the cans, who's 40 years old, having to tell them about their masturbation practices, sexual practices, other kind of gross stuff that people get up to, violent stuff. They have to confess to a 12-year-old because, hey, that 12-year-old is an adult in a little body.
Jesus Christ.
And that's just one example. Let's not even go into the underage sex and the sex crimes that have occurred because of those attitudes. It's really, it gets atrocious real fast when you start diving into some of that stuff. And while the Church of Scientology will certainly claim that, you know, pedophilia and child sexual assault are not okay, these beliefs say otherwise, and they have justified individual Scientologists doing this kind of thing, and the church has covered it up. And unfortunately, I personally know about 4 different instances of that during the time I was a Sea Org member. Not that I ever took part in, of course, but that I found out after the fact. And that kind of stuff was alarming. That was hard to deal with, even when I was in that headspace.
So I mean, it's because I want to get to this Danny Masterson thing, but I guess I don't want to keep ignoring the elephant in the room, which I think when people think Scientology, there's one person they think of, right? Who's that? Who do you think is the most famous Scientologist?
Who could it be?
I wonder. He runs a lot, but I mean, I like him as a movie star, but it's what's really crazy to me is just the fact that he's still so high level of a support when there's such serious allegations that keep coming about. What is your, comment or thoughts upon Tom Cruise? Is he treated as a hero in the organization? It seems like that's right. He's just the highest level you can attain there.
Yes. Tom Cruise is the top of the top in Scientology as far as reputation, admiration, awe that people feel toward him. He is clearly one of the most, successful professionals on the planet. The guy is a, superstar. And that's all great. But he also personally happens to be the same personality type as David Miscavige. And that's a predatory, abusive personality. And a lot of Miscavige and Tom Cruise are best friends. They're 2 peas in a pod. They hang out together all the time. They talk to each other. And Tom Cruise gets a lot of power in Scientology. The Sea Org, the people who sign up for the billion years, tend to be the top of the hierarchy. They're the VIPs of Scientology because they're the ones keeping it all together. Well, David Miscavige said Tom Cruise is actually senior to all of them. He called him the most dedicated Scientologist he knows. Right. And a lot of the Sea Org were like, what? What about us?
Right. Right.
But Tom Cruise.
He's more famous. So there you go.
Tom Cruise. And Tom Cruise has actually taken advantage of the Sea Org in that he has had Sea Org members do work, renovations work, personal work, assistant work for him in his life for nothing, for pennies, for no pay whatsoever. Because I didn't mention earlier, but when you're in the Sea Org, your room and board are provided to you by the Church of Scientology, and you're given $50 a week for pay. That's what you make. So the guys who did all this work for Tom Cruise weren't even making that. And they renovated his hangar and his home and various other things. The Sea Org has very much infiltrated Tom Cruise's life. So it's kind of, you can't really talk about one without talking about the other.
I mean, is he being used, or do you really feel like he's as egregious as the rest of them? I mean, I've always had this secret theory that they must have shown him the aliens or something. Like he's gotten a level that most people don't get, and he just, and it just has owned it. What? Go ahead.
Well, Tom Cruise is a bit of a narcissist, right? And Scientology is something that exacerbates or blows up a person's narcissism. I mean, it really cranks the dial up to 11. And Miscavige has made sure that Cruise's ego is fed by Scientology and Scientologists. So he, the whole couch jumping thing, the Matt Lauer interview, the public statements he made in the mid to late 2000s about psychiatry, psychology, psych drugs, Scientology, etc. All of that is kind of the real Tom Cruise popping up. And it took a great deal of effort on the part of the studios and the people who are not Scientologists around Tom Cruise to tamp that down and make it stop, because he was ruining his reputation and his career by being who he really is. And so he had to shutter all that. And that's why you don't see him act that way anymore.
Interesting. I never knew that theory, but that makes more sense.
Oh, yeah. That's what happened. His publicist changed from Pat Kingsley to his own sister, who's a hardcore Scientologist. And his sister, who is basically his manager, is more afraid of David Miscavige than she is of Tom Cruise.
Crazy. And again, I'm putting this up for our own legal. This is a speculation warning. Do you think he's just, is there a money thing to this too? Or you think he's really doing all this to keep, reaping in those rewards too? Or just, you think it's all in his head?
Oh, no. This is belief. This is extremism. Tom Cruise has all the money he's ever going to want. It's not about money. For Tom Cruise, it's about influence, power, and what he considers doing good. See, it's not. When I was a Scientologist, Tom Cruise is a Scientologist. These are well-intentioned people. This is not like they want to watch the world burn. Scientologists want to see a better world. It's not their intentions that are off. It's their actions. It's what they do to go about making a better world. Because I say that in the same spirit that I would say, a suicide bomber wants to basically make the world a better place too. But how they go about doing it is absolutely insane. So it's not a matter of I'm questioning Tom Cruise's intentions as an individual. It's the predatory and abusive actions he takes as a Scientologist that I have a problem with.
So there's no redemption for him in your mind. You don't think if something really egregious was like, here it is, here's the video proof, there's no more disputing Scientology is crooked and awful. Is there a version where Tom finally accepts that and renounces Scientology that could work for you? Or do you think he's just too far gone for that redemption?
No, I think there's redemption for almost anybody. I don't see that Tom Cruise is unsavable. I was in it for my entire life. I got out.
Right. Yeah.
I don't, anything's possible. Change is definitely possible. He just doesn't seem to have any motivation or reason to change or even look at his actions as potentially, abusive or wrong. And when somebody one of the things that Scientology instills in people, and this is by design, and it's very purposeful, is certainty. That this is really harped on and emphasized in Scientology. In fact, L. Ron Hubbard called Scientology the science of certainty. And if you are certain of a thing, if you are unwilling to question it, then you'll never change. And that's kind of where his head is at. But that could, anything's possible.
Kim, I know you have questions. I'm sorry, I'm drowning on my own, being selfish. I've had so many messages asked, though, about Shelley Miscavige. There's a lot of theories. I guess that's David's wife who has, disappeared.
Not been in public since 2007.
So what is your theory on what happened to Shelley Miscavige?
Well, Tony Ortega's reporting on this has been quite good. And it appears that she is being held at a compound that Church of Scientology owns in the mountains around Lake Arrowhead, Big Bear area in California. They have an organization up there called the Church of Spiritual Technology, and it appears that she's been working up there. And that's the subunit within Scientology that is tasked with saving or preserving all of L. Ron Hubbard's written and spoken works in such a medium that they actually bury them in the ground, hermetically sealed in vacuum containers to survive a nuclear war. So if there's a Holocaust or a nuclear Holocaust of some kind, Scientology will survive that.
Jesus Christ, that's terrifying.
Through these underground vaults, right? And they have these in New Mexico. They tried to build one up in Wyoming. There's a couple in California. And she works at one of those facilities.
So you think she's okay? I mean, like they're not trying to keep her away from things. You don't think there's a conspiracy in that regard that they're trying to hide her?
Oh no, I didn't. No, I didn't say
You didn't
that.
say that.
No, all of the above. Everything you just
Yeah.
said. I mean, she hasn't been seen since 2007. This is David Miscavige's wife, the wife of the leader. She hasn't made any public appearances with him in over 15 years.
That's so strange. Why does Tom Cruise not? It's like, how do you not at a certain point? You're that. It's just, I find it fascinating to be so deep in that you ignore something like that and don't see
it's
something
not a matter
smells
of,
fishy.
Let's be clear. It's not a matter of ignoring it. It's a matter of justifying it. When Scientology is presented as the one thing that is senior to life, because it explains all of life, as I mentioned earlier, that means that if something is good for Scientology, it doesn't matter what the negative consequences are otherwise. If Shelley Miscavige is what's called in Scientology an out ethics person, if she's not with the program, if she's not supporting Dave, and that's what Dave believes, is that she turned traitor and he relegated her off to this, hidden area, then Tom Cruise would go along with that, because what David Miscavige says is what is good for Scientology. He's the leader. He's the guy who's in charge. He represents and directs Scientology. So Tom Cruise goes along with that. And you can, one of the things that I've come to learn in studying and getting a real university education on coercive control is that belief drives action, and that if you believe something, you can justify anything if you have a good enough reason for it. And Scientologists believe quite wrongly that Scientology is a good enough reason to abuse, harass, stalk, and even, hurt people.
Kim, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Oh, I did have one question. There was an article that was shown to us about you that it looks like perhaps Scientology may have written. And I was curious if you have anything you would like to say regarding the information that is out about you coming from Scientology.
Sure, we saw they're labeling you a deadbeat dad and crazy. A lot of theories. Again, what is your response to this?
Sure. Yeah. My response is that the Church of Scientology likes to twist things around in very interesting ways. There is truth to the fact that, in terms of the allegations that are made against me, I have a son. My son lives in Australia, and he was raised there by his mother. I was a staff member in Santa Barbara when that happened. I was stuck in Santa Barbara. She was in Perth, Australia, and they were not interested in letting me go. And I didn't have any money or resources to support him, do much of anything, because while I worked at the Church of Scientology, I was making about $20 a week average. They don't mention that in the article, right? So, so fact of the matter is that after I got out of Scientology, I went to spend a week with my son, and I met him for the first time in the real world, and spent quite a bit of time with him out there. And one of the wonderful things that he told me that I was very relieved to hear, actually, because I had felt quite guilty about the fact that there had been this long period of time where I had spent more time dedicated to Scientology than to my biological son, right, who I was not around to be with. That's what I mean about those whack priorities. When Scientology is senior to everything, you can justify anything. So I found out from him that the Australian system is such that as a single mom, his mother was better off without me sending support. He was like, that was actually a good thing. And I went, oh God, thank you for telling me that, because I had felt so bad. Of course, Scientology, uses that guilt and uses those circumstances to try to paint it out as though I intentionally neglected him and left him and was all of that, when you're just a deadbeat
dad with history of lying. But the truth is that all because of Scientology, you were so stuck not being the person you should be, and then they use their own sinister shit against you. And I assume this is a Scientology funded site, sort of to go against Leah Remini's show, correct?
Oh, well, check this out. That article appeared, that website appeared the day after I was on Leah's show for the first time.
Yeah.
Of course,
So
they were ready.
had ignored me for a couple of years. I had been producing videos, and they had just ignored anything I had to say until the day I appear on Leah's show. Oh, suddenly we must expose the awful person who is Chris Shelton, right? So,
right.
Yeah.
Again, it's just the takeaway I get is I try to be fair. It's like there's just aside from Tom Cruise, there's really no one else out there that I feel like is like very publicly like. I mean, there's a few other celebrities. We don't have to name them all, but there are some more. But it does feel very secret, right, and very insular. And most other religions that I would say are not cults, hey, they're out and about in their normal life. You get to interact with them and engage with them and have disagreements with them, and they get to go home to their kids and go to their jobs. It's very hard to justify how this religion is so insular, right? And incestuous in a weird, you know what I mean? Like there's just something about those things that are red flags to me.
Yeah, that's another one of those destructive cult characteristics. Isolated, insular, our world. It's very us versus them. I mean, I didn't even know, wasn't actually fully aware of this, but I'll share this with you is until I got out, I didn't realize the term they use that L. Ron Hubbard adopted for non-Scientologists is the word WOG. That word is a racial slur with emphasis on the slur part. And Hubbard chose that on purpose. He spread it around to Scientologists who I didn't realize that was what I was saying when I was in Scientology, all those wogs out there, wog this, wog that. And it's just that kind of incidental racism and there's a lot of nonsense that goes on in Scientology because of this us versus them. We're better than everybody else. We're the exalted, knowledgeable ones, and everybody else is mired and stuck in a swamp of ignorance. And when you have an attitude like that about everybody else in the world who's not part of your group, it's so easy to start justifying ill will and even violence towards those people.
We can open up the free form, and thank you guys who have supported. Obviously, we need your support when we talk about subjects like this, because we're talking about some pretty heavy stuff with some powerful people that don't like you criticizing them. So thanks to your support. Keep it coming. I'll get to your super chats in a minute, but I do want to get to obviously this is all, the reason we're bringing all this up again is because of this trial of Danny Masterson. I'd be remiss to not get your thoughts on what's happening with Danny. Danny and his team are seemingly trying to make this case not be about Scientology. However, it does seem sort of silly of them to try to not make it about Scientology, given that that seems to be part of the reason a lot of this was not able to go to the police and not make these reports that these alleged victims are making because of the rules of Scientology. I'm curious, what is your take on this, Danny Masterson? You didn't know him. I know you told us that. You never met him, correct?
Correct. I have not met Danny Masterson. I did read reports about him while I was in the church. One thing to know about Scientology is that it is a snitch culture. It's a spying culture. People in Scientology write reports on other Scientologists, and there is a extensively detailed intelligence system kind of built into the fabric of Scientology. And so you're constantly being watched and reported on. And Danny Masterson's no exception to that. And so while I was in, I did see some reports that had to do with him, but otherwise I did not run into him.
What can you share more about what that means? What kind of things did you hear about Danny Masterson?
Oh, simply that he was a out ethics Scientologist, meaning he would take drugs, he would go partying as a celebrity. He hung out with unsavory types who were, out partying until 4 a.m. and this kind of thing. Just behavior that was frowned upon by Scientology, and especially the drugs, because Scientology prides itself on being a group that is drug-free. They are incredibly anti-drug. And Masterson was a real bad boy as a celebrity because he was out doing the celebrity thing. Right. That's what I read. So nothing particularly astoundingly salacious, but from Scientologist's point of view, he was a very bad boy.
So bad. Okay, got it. But then regarding these charges of these women who have come forward alleging that they weren't able to come forward from Scientology, the theory that the LAPD may have been involved in trying to hold this down. That seems to be one side of this argument. And then there's Danny's side, which is, well, no, Leah Remini and team are all just trying to keep the ratings. And this is all, they're all working together. Do you have an opinion on this case based on what you've read so far?
Yes, very much so, of course. I have not just an opinion, I have a certain degree of experience and knowledge about how the Sea Org conducts itself. And I do happen to know, personally, I knew some of the people who were involved with handling these women. There was a man named Julian Schwartz, for example, who was a Sea Org member, and he is an ethics officer. That's his job title. That means he polices people's ethics, their behavior, their conduct. And behavior is very, very regulated in Scientology. So is public image. Public image is number one. And the comparison I'll draw here is to the Catholics. In the face of pedophile priests, the Catholic Church chose to make a decision to cover their asses and cover their public image. And this is very, very well documented. Scientology really treated these women the exact same way. They came forward against Masterson individually. They were not a group. They didn't know about each other for years. And back in the early 2000s, they, each one of them were coming forward to these ethics people and saying, something really bad happened to me, and Danny Masterson did it. And they were told, sit down, shut up, it's your fault. And the principle in Scientology that was applied to them is a very, very pervasive principle there, which is you are always responsible for your own condition. If something happened to you, you're the one who's at fault for it. You pulled it in, is how they say it. You pulled that in. And this is an inarguable point in Scientology. And so when these women were trying to say, hey, this really bad thing happened to me, and this guy's the one who did it, they were told they were making it up, it wasn't true, or they needed to keep it quiet. And how could it be rape if he's your boyfriend? And, just these really outmoded, dumbass ways of approaching it, all to keep it down. Because my experience of Scientology and the Sea Org consistently was that image was more important than facts. And I mentioned earlier those 4 instances where children were sexually assaulted that I knew about. Every one of those were covered up. And the discipline that happened to the offenders happened internally. No police were ever involved in any of those situations. And the children and their parents, who were Scientologists, were intimidated into silence. And that happened. The same thing happened with these women. They were intimidated into silence because the church could not possibly be, seen to be unethical to this level or degree. And no single celebrity Scientologist like Danny Masterson could possibly be exposed this way. One thing to know about Danny Masterson is, as far as the Church of Scientology's view of Masterson is concerned, it's not just him. He is part of an entire network of Scientology celebrities and VIPs, his entire family, his sister, his half-brother, people who were on the 70s show, people who he's connected with. There's a lot of influence and power and money there. And if Masterson is threatened, all of that is threatened. And that's the way the Church of Scientology looks at these things. And so they go, well, here's these women saying this happened to them, but that's just their point of view. Whatever, no, that's not what's important here. What's important is our image and Danny Masterson's success as a VIP Scientologist. He's the one who's making money for Scientology. He's the one who's doing press for Scientology. He's the one who, therefore, is in Scientology's good graces. He's what's called, there's a lot to this, but I'll just say he's the one who's called an upstat, a productive Scientologist. They are the negatives. They're the not successful, not productive, not paying Scientologists.
Jesus.
And when your
So mean.
metric is money and influence, that's how you make your decisions.
Yeah.
It's
a
awful.
crappy way to treat your followers. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm just saying it's awful. It's inhuman. And this is what I meant when I mentioned earlier that, people's human and civil rights don't really matter in Scientology, especially when compared to the mission and the image of Scientology. And of course, the horribly ironic thing about this is Scientology couldn't have a worse public image, but they labor under the delusion that the world actually welcomes Scientology and can't wait for Scientology, and everybody in the planet wants Scientology. They just don't know it yet. It's that kind of a group and that kind of an attitude. And again, I know this all too well because I was there and I used to think this way.
Do you see an end in sight where this is all really officially exposed because of people like Leah and others like you who have come forward to share these true stories? Like it still doesn't seem to have put a dent in them. Do you think there is an end in sight or a reckoning for them being exposed? Or do you think at this point it's just there's too many, it's too powerful? What are your thoughts?
No, not at all. I definitely believe that we can change this situation and that the work that we've been doing has been changing it. They have been forced to make internal changes in Scientology as a result of the exposure we have provided. And by we, I really want to pump Leah, Mike Rinder, for their work on Scientology in the Aftermath, which was an Emmy Award-winning show. It really is amazing. So was Larry Wright and Alex Gibney's documentary Going Clear. Those are just picture perfect exposés of the abuses of Scientology, and they matter and they've made a difference. There used to be, for example, a regular practice of forced abortions in Scientology, where women who got pregnant in the Sea Org, they wanted to keep them in the Sea Org, and you can't have babies if you're in the Sea Org. So forced abortion. That happened to me and my wife when I was in the wife I had when I was in the Sea Org. We had to get an abortion. That was forced on us. And there was a lot of yelling and screaming and desk pounding and threats in order to make that happen. It was not something we did lightly. And that's a deep regret that I have to this day. My ex-wife who did that is still in Scientology, and she is still in that mindset. So I live that firsthand. Well, that practice has been curbed now because of all of the exposure. Now Scientology Sea Org members get pregnant, they tend to just kick them to the curb and get rid of them now. So there's changes like that where some of the most abusive stuff has been at least tempered down a little bit, but it's still going on, and there's still child recruitment, there's still sexual problems, there's still abusive stuff going on daily there. So there's some change, but is it enough? No, not even remotely.
Well, there you have it. Another great show. Thank you so much to our guest, Chris Shelton, who showed up and really gave us some insight on the world of Scientology. You can go follow him over on YouTube. Please make sure you also go support my friends, Steph the Alter Nerd, and It's Kim. They're also on YouTube. In fact, can you double check that you're subscribed to all of us? YouTube is being a real pain in the butt. If you like real content like this, support it. Hit the bell, smash the like, and join us live. We're here every day, and we post videos every day, so we'd love to see you here. If you really want to see and support, become a member. You can hit that join button, pick a tier, hit the join. You can always catch the replays. We stream for about 3 hours every day. We trim it to half hour to an hour. If you want to watch the full show, though, become a member. You can watch it whenever you want. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm off to see Halloween Ends. I'll let you guys know how it is over my other channel, Movie World, and I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow here on the show. Enjoy the rest of your day. Check out Lewis over on Rumble. He might be there. Nerd Report. See you guys later. Bye.